大家好，今天我们要去拜访一位会说中文的犹太教授。第一次遇见教授时，他用蹩脚的中文和我聊着他对中国文化多么感兴趣。也是得以这样的契机，我才能更深入地了解这个神秘又富有智慧的犹太民族。可汗教授早上好，很高兴今天能和您聊一聊犹太文化、犹太民族。您知道我一直对这些文化东西非常感兴趣，所以希望能在您这里找到答案。
我也很开心可以接待你，不过我的中文不太好，你可以用中文问我，我会用英文回答你。
没问题，我用中文提问，您可以用英文回答。那我们对犹太非常好奇，但是似乎有一些误解，比如犹太教是宗教还是种族呢？
So that's actually a very good question. Judaism is both an ethnicity or a race and a religion. And so the Jews were a people that lived in a minor kingdom in the Middle East around the year 1000 BCE in the reign of King David and King Solomon, who were the most famous ancient Jewish kings. And that's around the time, it's 3,000 years ago, around the time of the beginning of the Zhou dynasty in China. And King Solomon built the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and that was the most glorious time of the ancient people of Israel. Now, King David is the most famous Jewish king, and you'll see here on the Jewish flag what we call the Star of David, or the Shield of David, Magen David in Hebrew, which is probably legendary. Probably was not his shield, but that's the way we talk about it, and it was taken for the emblem of the state of Israel because King David is our most emblematic king and most famous king. And in fact, the Israeli Red Cross is called Magen David Adom, the red Star of David. Now, already by the time of King David, the Jewish history went back about another 800 years to the forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who lived in Israel as a small family clan, but they had to move to Egypt. Jacob's descendants moved to Egypt because of famine in the land of Israel, and they were enslaved there, and they were probably part of those workforces that built the pyramids. But after a few hundred years, Moses, the greatest prophet of the Jewish people, brought the people of Israel out of Egypt and resettled them in the land of Israel. But the most defining moment of the Jewish people was when they received the Torah, when they received the Bible at Mount Sinai. And this is our sacred scripture. And here you have a miniature of what the Torah looked like. And in the olden days, this is the way they used to make books. And so this is our Torah scroll. What does the Torah contain in it? In ancient Hebrew, it tells about the stories, the histories that I just mentioned about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the sojourn in Egypt. But more importantly, it tells us the laws of how we have to behave and how we have to care for the sick and honor our parents, all of the rituals of the festivals, and then also the sacrifices in the temple that King David and King Solomon built and worshipped in. So the Jewish people are the descendants of those original Jewish people who lived in Israel.
听起来是3000年前的故事了，那现在又和这些过去的故事有什么关系呢？
So that's a very important question. Probably the most defining moment of Judaism after the temple is in the year 70 of the Common Era. The Romans destroyed the temple that had been previously destroyed and rebuilt, but in 70 AD, 70 CE, it was destroyed by the Romans for good. and there's only a small remnant now that's called the Western Wall, which you can see in Jerusalem, but that meant that the Jewish people were exiled from Israel. The state ceased to exist until 1948. So for almost 2,000 years, the Jews were stateless. And so the only way for the Jewish people to remain alive was to keep that memory of the state of Israel and the Holy Temple, but we also retained the Torah, the study of the scripture and the rituals. Now things had to change because we no longer had a temple to be the center of our worship. Now the center shifted to synagogues, to places where we gathered to worship. A synagogue is like a Jewish church where we gather for prayer, but it's not only prayer, it's also a community center. And so that's where poor people were permitted to live in the synagogue if they couldn't live elsewhere. And so we continued to care for the sick. We continued the rituals of the festivals. And the other important point where Jews defined themselves was around the family table. And the rabbis, who are our teachers and our sages, they said that actually the table, the family table, is like the altar where the sacrifices were brought in the Holy Temple. So the Jewish community is tight-knit, a community around the synagogue and on the table as well.
那就是说，分布在世界各地的犹太人，以家庭和社区联系在一起，有着共同的文化和传统。
Yes, yes, indeed. So now to get back to your original question, is Judaism an ethnicity or a religion? And the answer is that it's both. It's primarily the descendants of the people who lived in Israel at the time of King David and Solomon, and their descendants, their followers, their successors, and who retain the traditions and the behavior of the people of Israel and the Torah.
那些不遵守传统的犹太人，或者皈依犹太教但不是犹太人的人呢？
Yes, so that's a good point. And the reality is that Judaism does not seek converts, but if converts come to adhere to our traditions, we welcome them warmly, and they are considered Jews as well. However, there are also Jews who are biologically Jewish and ethnically Jewish, but they don't keep the traditions, and they are Jewish as well in our understanding. And so it's like two sets, biological Jews and behavioral Jews, let's say, and then there's a big overlap between them.
谢谢您非常详细的解答。我想之后还有一些问题可以帮我更好的去理解犹太民族、犹太文化。谢谢。
谢谢你。